rewind. Great, Tamar. Now, once again, good evening, everyone. Today, we are basically attending this training with that's being presented to us, so to speak, by SeeD. Now, basically what we're going to be diving into today is SeeD's Social Cohesion and Reconciliation Index. That's the SCORE or SCORE Index, which is primarily used in post-conflict societies, essentially. And more specifically, we'll be looking at the implementation of the SCORE Index in West Africa, so in post-conflict societies in West Africa, more specifically. So to take us through all of this, we have two presenters today, essentially. The first up is Meltem Ikinji. She's the Cyprus Program Lead and Learning and Innovation Officer for SeeD. Meltem holds an MSc in Management and Implementation of Development Projects from the University of Manchester, and also has over 10 years experience with social cohesion and reconciliation. So basically the stuff included in SCORE in many diverse contexts. So she's worked in a couple of different places, basically. Meltem is generally passionate about research design and the importance of that for bettering our understanding of social emotional skills, civic engagement, livelihoods, and the prevention of violence. She's more passionate, or even more passionate, I guess, in turning all the insights that she gets from all that research into solutions in supporting policymakers to implement and improve people's lives more generally. The Innovation Officer at SeeD. So Meltem is local and she's right here with us. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
You're welcome. We also have Meltem's colleague, Abdon Koko. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. I'm sorry if I didn't. Who's SeeD's Africa Program Specialist. Abdon also has an MSc from RITS. I'm so sorry, this looks like it's going to be difficult to pronounce. From the Ritsumeikan. Can you correct me?
Ritsumeikan.
Thank you.
University.
From Ritsumeikan University, which is in Japan. So that explains the name. And his MSc essentially focused on the relationship between social capital and economic development. Abdon is passionate about evidence-based thinking and regularly publishes on local economic dynamics to contribute to informed and sustainable local development initiatives in Ivory Coast, which is where he's based, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, that's where he's based. He's an active member of Ivorian civil society, so I guess that's the answer to that, where he leads multiple civic initiatives working on democracy, civic behavior, and livelihoods. His conviction that strong and resilient social cohesion and peace is essential for sustainable development led him to SeeD. And so you see there's a lot of context with what we'll be talking about today. Since 2019, he has been working on SCORE efforts focused on violence prevention and education reform in partnership with Interpeace, Indigo, UNICEF, and the European Union. Wow, that's quite the portfolio Abdon. Thank you for joining us today as well.
Thank you very much.
Okay, now in terms of the program, Meltem is basically going to start off and give us, more of a general, not really abstract, but more general than anything else, understanding of, first of all, what SeeD is as an organization, and then more specifically and in more detail about the SCORE Index, which is what we'll be talking about today. So Abdon will then subsequently help contextualize all that information, drawing from his experience, implementing it in practice. Okay. So Meltem, please feel free to take over the floor.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Samuel, for the excellent introduction.
Okay.
Can you enable screen sharing?
Alpha, could you please do that? I'm also trying.
Done.
Thank you.
Okay. Do you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, excellent. So thanks a lot. So I would like to start with a very brief introduction on who we are. So SeeD is an international research-driven innovation hub with headquarters in Cyprus. And we work with international development agencies, governments, civil society, to design and implement evidence-based strategies for strengthening mainly resilience, social cohesion, and sustaining peace in post-conflict and fragile contexts. We mainly work in 5 thematic areas, namely social cohesion, reconciliation, youth inclusion, gender empowerment, governance, anti-corruption, and urban cohesion. As of today, SeeD has had projects in about 20 countries since its establishment in 2012. We've had projects across Europe, Africa, Asia, and Middle East. The countries that are highlighted in lighter green represent mostly our current project portfolio, namely Ukraine, Burkina Faso, Ivory Coast, Zimbabwe, and Rwanda. We're also about to launch a new project in Cyprus. It will be an online campaign to promote gender equality across the island through an online civic engagement platform. And in addition to this new Cyprus project, we're also about to start new projects in Niger and Ethiopia as well, using Score Index. So what is Score Index? This is always a challenging question to answer, and I would like to refer to it as an assessment framework to measure peace across countries through 2 main components, social cohesion and reconciliation. And we define social cohesion as the quality of coexistence between people and within the institutions that surround them. While reconciliation refers to the harmonious coexistence between groups that were previously engaged in a dispute or conflict. And overall, the Score Index combines an extensive participatory approach with very advanced statistical analysis to build the contextual understanding of social, political, and economic dynamics in order to identify the drivers of peaceful and social change. Score draws inspiration from multiple scientific disciplines, and we maintain flexibility to incorporate research findings, policy guidelines, and realities of various contexts. Our team includes psychiatrists, psychologists, economists, and development practitioners such as myself. And this diagram on the left conceptualizes in very simple terms the overall project cycle when we implement Score in any given context. And it has steps from designing a research framework through participatory processes involving local stakeholders, all the way to data collection and analysis, and finally, translating data into policy impact for leveraging social change. You will get better understanding of the entire process in the second part of the presentation when we go through specific projects. So what do we offer when we go to a new country or a new context? We basically use these advanced analysis to identify social dynamics. We'll look into the trends that underpin the social dynamics, for instance, drivers of political violence or drivers of support for a peace referenda. And it's highly contextual, it's highly conflict sensitive, and it always draws on local realities, because each time we do a score project, we always include local stakeholders, whether they are, local or national governments or local authorities and key actors from the very beginning of the project, which is how we contextualize our research. And overall, through this advanced methodology, we can also develop predictive modeling. So we can make forecasts of outcomes that may be likely to occur through longitudinal analysis. When we collect data over time, we can establish trends in a given society to see, for instance, which areas are more vulnerable towards external shocks or outbreaks of violence. And through these research findings, we do inform evidence-based policy design. So in many country contexts, our research findings are used by, for instance, UNICEF to prepare schools in Ukraine, in eastern part of Ukraine, regarding their COVID preparedness. And through all these research findings and participatory policy design, we also help international development agencies to plan their budget allocations. So here we can now zoom into the calibration process, which means how we contextualize this methodology into a given context in each project. So as we can say, evidence-based policy depends on selecting the correct indicators to measure a social phenomenon. In other words, to develop effective policy insights, the data needs to correspond and be relevant to the policy dilemmas that each country faces. So the indicators that we need to select for our questionnaires, for our research tools, should allow us to explore and answer the policy questions of interest. And this is our starting point when we design the questionnaire, and it requires, as you can see, a very vigorous and thorough approach. So as the first step in the calibration, we initially have discussions with our donors and key national stakeholders to identify which thematic areas they want to explore. And then based on these discussions, we then conduct an in-depth literature review to develop a deeper understanding, as well as to flesh out the key policy issues and actors relevant. Then based on this literature review, we do conduct expert interviews, focus group discussions in order to inform our research design, which actually allows us to build hypothesis for testing, and we build conceptual models to then further test after data collection. So through these expert interviews and consultations, we do exchange information with national or regional authorities, academics, international NGOs, as I mentioned, to identify the local problems on the ground and to develop strategic research questions. Once we develop the research framework based on these conceptual models, we then proceed with questionnaire design and sample design. I will not get into too much detail about the questionnaire design because it's too technical and I don't want to bore you. But I just want to give you an overall sense of what are the main thematic areas we usually examine through these research metrics. So here we can take a closer look at these key issues. It can vary from youth protection to women's empowerment to citizenship, the role of media, and the social contract in societies, as well as we have livelihoods, food security, climate responsibility, and political, enabling political solutions for peace. So in order to gather in-depth information in these thematic areas, we do research in macro level and micro level. We can collect data from individuals through the household questionnaires, or we can have community questionnaires. For instance, we conducted another survey, for instance, to examine the perceptions of community leaders in South Sudan, for instance. Or we also do research at institutional level when we do expert interviews or scoring cards, governance scoring cards to assess, for instance, the capacities of government institutions in fighting against government corruption in Liberia, for instance. So here I provided a list of several different research approaches that we've used across multiple projects in SCORE. So we have a huge variety of research tools, all the way from household to individual surveys to geospatial mapping and randomized trials of interventions, for instance, at the community level. We can get into details at a later stage if you like, but now I want to move on a bit quickly so that we can spend more time on discussing country projects. So here, when it comes to interpretation and socialization of results, when we do the data analysis, we develop the preliminary research findings and then we take them back to the stakeholders, the local stakeholders that form our core reflection group. And we then validate these research findings and discuss their implications with the local stakeholders. So after the data collection, the insights directly go back to the local context, because this is very important to make sure that we interpret data correctly. And I forgot to mention that we always try to have a local implementing partner, which is essential to build local ownership and to help us build these linkages, because we are just the experts to provide the methodology, but they are actually the owners of the SCORE process, and they do lead actually the whole process of interpreting these research findings. So through these validation results, we then maybe in most contexts, we conduct further analysis. They may ask us to do more predictive modeling or look into more in-depth analysis of the predictors that may cause a specific phenomenon. So we do usually conduct more advanced analysis before finalizing our research findings. Overall, I have just 3 points to share when it comes to presenting the final research findings and recommendations. We basically have 3 principles. We care and make sure that we always have direct suggestions. So when we do these research in different contexts, whatever our recommendations are, they must be very direct and applicable. So, because most of the time, the people that we need to influence, meaning the policy makers or other civil society organizations, they don't need to be psychologists or they don't need to understand a statistical model. So we need to be very direct, very precise, and we need to make sure that we present the right policy recommendation to the right audience. It's not effective if we go to an NGO and present something that has to do with, directly the policymakers. We need to be very, very focused. And another important point is to make sure that our research findings are easy to understand. I would say that as a self-criticism, this is something that SeeD has been struggling over the past years, because we have also so many academic people in the team, and usually a sentence ends up with like 10 technical terms or jargons, but actually I think we've been making a lot of extra effort to make sure that our findings are more digestible and easier to understand, because that's the only way we can actually achieve change. I see that there is a comment. Hi, Manuel. Yes. Yes, and actually, if I can just pause here for a second, we took your feedback into account when we did the partner survey. And I have been pressuring and pestering the rest of the team here that we need to simplify things, because, I mean, yes, academia is good, but we need to differentiate different domains between academia and, social change. So this actually takes me to the right side of my slide. So how can we transmit these results to influence change? We need to produce different materials to reach out to different audiences. And I find this sometimes even more important than the actual research itself. I have been discussing this thoroughly with our partners, with World Bank as well, because they're facing the same dilemma in most of the time. They do too advanced analytics, and sometimes it's very hard, especially when you try to reach out to more vulnerable groups or, less privileged communities. So basically we produce reports and briefs or official presentations for more technocratic audience, I would say, like policymakers or government institutions. However, for more wider society and less usual suspects, let's say, we offer blog posts, infographics, and social media posts.
Hello, Madam. Are you there?
Hello? Can you hear me? Shall I continue?
Yeah, your voice is clear.
Okay, cool. So, for instance, this is one example of an accessible way to present our findings to diverse audiences. It's an infographic poster from our projects in Liberia. It's a poster, actually. It's about civic duty. So what is civic duty? Sense of civic duty is one's belief that they can change their country for the better, meaning that they're also dedicated to work for the common good. It is an important indicator for cultivating constructive citizenship, which includes supporting gender equality policies, rejecting authoritarianism, political violence, and sexual and gender-based violence. And this infographic poster summarizes the key predictors which can be encouraged to allow sense of civic duty to develop. Thus, policymakers and experts in Liberia interested in implementing programmatic interventions which are evidence-based could use these findings and design relevant policies that would increase sense of civic duty and, in essence, constructive citizenship. I particularly choose this infographic because I feel that it's very close to our hearts, both here in Cyprus and also our home countries. So I think it's something that we all need to keep working on. Here we can see some examples of our more policy-oriented products. These are the latest briefs that were developed for SCORE Liberia. And in terms of the examples of best practices, like, okay, we have done this amazing research, but what were the outcomes? How did we influence policy? What changes have occurred because of our research findings? Here we can see a few examples from West Africa context. So basically, I'll leave the Ivory Coast and the rest to Upton, but mainly, for instance, we can say that EU funding has been influenced in Liberia. We informed the allocation of these fundings towards gender equality and anti-sexual and gender-based violence efforts in Liberia. We've also used it as a monitoring and evaluation tool in Liberia for the government's pro-poor agenda for prosperity and development. So actually, government of Liberia takes SDGs very seriously, and they have incorporated SCORE index into their national policy making process, and they are measuring progress towards SDG indicators through SCORE. So yeah, I'll leave the floor to Upton to explain in detail about the rest. So overall, some more self-reflection, what we can do better as SeeD in terms of implementing SCORE. As I mentioned earlier, I think we still need to work more and harder to produce more audience-friendly material. And we need to do some more targeted sampling to ensure social inclusion of minorities and harder to reach communities. And this is becoming particularly more difficult, especially when violence re-emerge in some contexts we work in, such as Ukraine. And some success indicators. What made us successful so far? As I mentioned before, we always try to customize the way we do our research. We choose the right research tools to accommodate the needs of the country. We always respect and try to incorporate local actors as much as possible from day one through the core reflection groups. Yes, Emmanuel, I've seen your message. I'd be happy to discuss this. It's an excellent question. I really would like us to discuss this further, but I think I've taken a lot of time, and I will leave the floor to Abdon now to continue giving more concrete examples from Ivory Coast. Abdon?
Yes, thank you very much, Meltem. And thank you to VOIS members to giving us this opportunity to share what we've been doing here in West Africa and in other part of the continent. On this slide, what I should say is that Ivory Coast is a country with, which is like many African countries, experiencing violence every time there is an election. Since we decided to go through the multi-party democracy. And since 1990, for over 30 years, we've been experiencing over and over violence through electoral period. So the idea was during the year 2020 to understand the root causes and the structural dynamics that were at play during the period of election, in order to help the country go smoothly through the election. So the SCORE methodology was used during this period in order to understand and highlight these structural causes. And the key indicators that we used in this project was the political violence tendency, which was a kind of aggregation of 3 indicators: aggression, which was more psychological indicator, and the readiness for political violence, which was trying to assess the let's say social acceptance of violence for reaching political goals, and the violence citizenship tendency, which was trying to assess the way people were willing to use violence in obtaining the action expression as citizens. So I guess you've been you're familiarized with heat maps because you've been interacting with Ilke and Meltem so far. So I know that you know that SeeD is like using heat maps in order to show the spatial representation of any phenomenon that we want to assess. And in Ivory Coast, for example, as you can see, the first part of this project about political violence concerned only 3 districts. The districts are the lower level just after the lower level just after the national level. All it took for the pilot
Abdon, are you there? I think it might be your internet, so it's lagging probably.
Abdon?
Yes, I have an unstable connection here. It was just raining, so what I was saying is that this project is now about to go into the scale-up phase for additional 7 districts. So out of the 14 districts we have in the country, we will have a total 10 districts that will be surveyed with a similar process. And can we move on, please?
Sure. Yes.
So the idea with this project is, let's say, show to the stakeholders and the partners what should be done and what are the entry points that needed to be followed in order to develop some intervention that will support reducing the violence tendency during electoral period. And we're starting another electoral cycle by 2023. So everyone here is kind of thinking about what should be done in order to make sure that we will not go through another cycle of violence for the next cycle. So we are working so hard on this point. Concerning the Liberia project, Meltem already talked about that, but what I needed to add on it is that what we did in 2021 was that we did a comparison of key indicators from the, let's say, key indicators from the PAPD, which were indicators that were, let's say, that the government really wanted to monitor with an idea to see the trend that is being taken toward the target of 2023. So we were mainly focused on assessing the Liberia overall score, and also some civic trust and coexistence indicator and satisfaction of state service delivery. But in addition to that, we also wanted to make sure that some negative indicators are following a downward trend, meaning violence tendencies, aggression in daily life, and endorsement of SGBV. The idea, when you can see, for example, the three indicators in blue, to be considered as positive indicators, meaning that with the higher the score is going, the better. And this is the opposite side for the three indicators in orange, the score, in order to make sure that we go in the right direction. What we can see is that there was a slight change in 2018, and in 2021 we came back to the previous level, the level of the year 2016. The key understanding we had from this point, while talking to the stakeholders and understanding the context, was that 2018 was an electoral year for Liberia. So it was like they have a new President George Weah. So the mood was very positive. So people were believing that things will go in the right direction and so on and so forth. So it doesn't mean that nothing has been done, but the score in 2021 is showing that people came back to the previous situation, and we're still having some discussion with different stakeholders in Liberia in order for them to understand the key messages that are coming out of these results. Meltem, can we move to? So another thing that we did in order to provide important result to the for the Liberia project was to try to understanding what does it mean to be a peaceful citizen. The idea was to understand whether or not there was a peace dividend in Liberia, from the withdrawal of UNMIL and to the time we were doing the survey. So all the drivers you see on the left, the adversity drivers, meaning that all the people we surveyed were facing these adversities, meaning severe victimization, lack of personal security, identity marginalization, and intergroup tension. But the thing is that when you check the resilience factor, which are the factors that showing that with the people who are facing the similar situation, similar adversities, some of them are displaying a certain level of peaceful citizenship score. And our understanding in our method, we wanted to understand what is associated to those who are scoring high on this indicator compared to those who are scoring very low when facing the same adversities. And this is what we call the resilience factors. And our resilience factors for this project can be summarized into two categories. The first one is related to state capacities, meaning states is the state capable of providing the necessary services to the people. Are these people in let's say communities which are experiencing good service delivery from the government services? And the second point, second category here is related to individual attitude and behaviors, meaning when people are facing, let's say, have a certain level of confidence in the, let's say, faith leaders, and have also some positive intergroup contacts and family coherence, it appears that the people experiencing this situation are also displaying high score for peaceful citizenship. The idea here was to understanding if there are some specific, let's say, area to develop in order to support the increase of the indicator that we are interested in, meaning the peaceful citizenship indicator. Can we move on, Milton? What we can say overall in West Africa was that though we have we use, as Milton told you previously, we use the statistical indicators, but we need to turn this result into meaningful ideas that can be owned by the policymakers or program designers, so on and so forth. The key lessons that we can take from our engagement in West Africa, in all the countries that we have been working, developing projects, is that the quality of the data is very important. And this is mainly based on how you train your enumerators and how they collect the data in the African context. I suppose most of you know, without enough connection, and little electricity provision and so on and so forth. So we are trying to collect the best data we can with all these situations in terms of the context in which we have to collect the data. In addition to that, there are some, let's say, security problem also, because we have to collect data in some situations where the security of the area is not so convenient. In addition to that, to this condition, we have accessibility in terms of infrastructure, language, the cultural sensitivity also, which is important because we don't always do things in French or in English, or we also need to be to have enumerators who are ready to do things, to do data collection in using the ability in speaking local languages and so on and so forth. For the analysis, we have the presence of data analysis that are embedded in African culture, which is very important for us. So while doing the data analysis, we do it with the contextual understanding of what this data may mean in terms of the result that we are producing. And in addition to that, while trying to provide the result, the finding from our research, we always have an eye kept on intervention while drafting the recommendation and the report, because at the end of the day, we are not the owner of as Meltem said, we are not the owner of the results. And we always need to make sure that if we want to influence policymakers, we need to make sure that they understand very well what we are telling them and what the data and the result that we are showing to them mean exactly for the outcome of the policy that they are intending to implement. So we try as much as we can to, in the context of the region here, we're trying to use the data to analyze the results and provide enough results and insight to the policymakers and program designer in order to support the initiative. Finally, in order to my hence, let's say, statement here about this fact is that SCORE is using lots of statistical results. And most of the time people tend to ask, how is it different from the official statistics that are available out there? And our response is very simple. Official statistics are about to support policymakers, that is sure, but it's also about comparison. So when you want to do comparison, you forget the contextualization. And with SCORE, we are since we are, let's say, context sensitive, we go deeper, and what we are doing is to provide the necessary statistics to support intervention. So usually the response we give people is that with SCORE, we provide statistical results to serve intervention, which is very different, literally different from the official statistics. But there are some links because we have been working in our project with National Institute of Statistics in different countries. So these are working together, but the added value for SCORE is that we are providing specific information for intervention. So thank you very much. Meltem, you have the floor.
Thank you, thanks. I think VOIS has the floor now.
Yes, indeed we do. I wanted to ask, do you guys have time for questions? Because I have about 2 questions that I really need to ask.
Yes, and we have the questions in the chat box.
Oh, I didn't even notice that there were questions in the chat box.
No? Yeah, we have one from Emmanuel.
Oh, okay. I mean, I guess we can start with Emmanuel's question then.
Yeah, please go ahead.
I think the question is kind of like, because okay, I know, for example, about the work that SeeD does, and so it would be interesting, for example, for some of our volunteers to kind of like, I don't know if you're thinking about it, but I remember in the past we had tried to establish some kind of a collaboration with SeeD, a partnership. And so the question here will be how we can borrow from the SCORE index, for example, as a methodological framework to improve inclusivity for migrant communities in the northern part of Cyprus.
Mm-hmm. I guess the question could be answered like we can break down the question a little bit, like how do you envision implementing the SCORE methodology? Like do you envision like a full cycle SCORE, or do you envision a collaboration where we exchange information about, our measurement metrics? What is the idea you have in mind?
I would say both. I mean, like, how would it work in both scenarios?
I think both scenarios would work quite differently. For instance,
and before you go ahead.
Yeah. So I think in the first scenario, I envision a scenario where before you conduct a survey, for instance, I know that you're doing a survey now for the GAP project.
Hello, now I think I can hear you now.
Okay, sorry. When
I can hear you fine. Oh.
Okay. So for instance, the first scenario would entail us getting together before you launch a new survey and go through your survey questionnaire together and give you some feedback or provide some technical advice if you need, of course, where you need, based on your research interest. So that's how I would see the first scenario. And the second one would be materialized where through a collaboration where we apply for a funding opportunity and we implement a research project together to serve the research interest. So it will be like a full-blown score process, where we design the data collection together, we develop the questionnaire together, we do the calibration process together. Of course, this requires a lot of like the whole cycle of score that we just discussed. So I can see that in real practice through a funding application, which we can submit together. And I believe that there is a lot of appetite for this. And there is a huge need for this, especially with the current economic crisis, which will have a lot of snowball effects in terms of social impacts as well. So I believe that it's a massive need.
And I mean, there is a recent call for proposal, which I'm sure you're aware of. So, I mean, that could be an area where we may want to focus on in terms of this collaborative effort. And my second question, I don't know whether it's directed towards you or towards Abdon. Many of our volunteers, including myself, I mean, I'm from Cameroon. Like there is a war in Cameroon, the same thing in Sudan, in Ukraine, where Mikola is from, there is in Yemen, where Shahad is also a war. I mean, many of our volunteers, and in fact, many students are coming from war-torn areas or areas, that have been or are prone towards violent conflict. And so I wonder whether SeeD, has some kind of an internship or training program that, maybe some of these volunteers may want to engage in and learn your methodology, so that once they go back to their countries, if they are able to go back, they could, and the methodology, or at least try to borrow from it and try to see how, they could contribute to their own country.
That's an excellent point, actually. Abdon, do you want to reflect on this? Abdon?
Yes, Melton, you can go ahead with that, and then maybe I can.
Sure. So we actually do not have an official internship program, but this is something that we have been discussing for a while internally as SeeD, and I think this is something that we should definitely explore what we can do and plan to make this happen, because we also think that this would be a mutual beneficial experience, both for the intern and for us as well, because we'll also get the chance to transfer the knowledge to more people, basically. And for instance, in Ukraine, because of the outbreak of war, we have faced a huge crisis. Our team had to be relocated because we had an office in Kiev. The male members of the team are still in Ukraine because they're not allowed to leave the country. The female team members have left the country, but we're trying our best to provide support through neighboring countries. And I think at that point we realized how important it is to get more help, more hands in the team to make sure that our members have the humanitarian need and support, as well as emotional support that they need. So definitely, it's not just an academic or scientific exercise, but it's also about empowering individuals who would then go back to post-conflict or fragile places to help their communities. Yeah, Abdon? Anything you want to add?
No, I think you said everything. And then the VOIS members also are in Cyprus. Perhaps the good point I can see in having the possibility of internship for students is that it helps build an international network for when they will be back to their countries. This network will be useful in terms of connecting with them. I myself, let's say, with my studies in Japan, I've been part of an international network of African former students who are back to their countries. And we kept, since then, we are still in contact with the Japanese counterparts. And from time to time, when they come, when they want to meet people, they can connect with us, and then we put them through to the right people that they want to meet. Some of them started a business with that. So, I mean, this is a very good opportunity. It will be a very good opportunity to start building an international network of students who are interested in understanding more and more what SCORE is, because in the future, this will start building international platform for SCORE practitioners and whoever wants to use SCORE for the purpose of the projects and programs in the respective countries.
Anyone?
All right, thank you. I don't know, Sam, if you want to ask the questions or if there are other questions.
Yes, I do actually. I have two questions. They're sort of related, but they're also sort of different at the same time. One is for Meltem and one is for Abdon as well. So my first question is, in the beginning, when you showed the first graph about your project cycle, essentially, you mentioned your data analysis after data collection, of course. And I wanted to ask more specifically, what does that process look like on your end? Like, what do you actually go through? You mentioned statistical modeling, etc. So I guess I'm asking how are you going about the modeling as well? Because there's a few ways to go about that, but also what sorts of statistical modeling are you doing? What tests are you running, etc.? If you have that information, of course, because I understand that might not be something.
I think Abdon might be better suited to answer this question about data analysis.
Okay.
Abdon?
Yes. Actually, what I can say is that it's the analysis depends on the scope of the study, actually.
Of course.
And during the calibration process, we designed our research framework And based on this research framework, we have a plan analysis that supports everything we have to do. But basically what we do is that we have two phases of data score analysis. The first one is initial statistical analysis, which helps building indicators and so on and so forth, and creating heat maps and doing some basic work using the data set we have. The second level of analysis is trying to, based on the plan of analysis, we usually work with correlation, doing predictive analysis. Depending on some analysis, we do cluster analysis and so on and so forth. And we also do resilience analysis. So it all depends. We use different techniques depending on the kind of questions and hypotheses we have to test.
Okay, all right, fair enough. That helps me. But sorry, one just quick follow-up question to that as well. Is this usually done manually? By manually, I mean, okay, I guess everything is done manually ultimately. What I'm asking is this process automated, or is it something? So do you maybe have machine learning models, that sort of thing?
I think some of the analysis is done manually, and some of them are done through a code, like they run models, like something called Python. I am not part of the data team, but I know that they're doing a lot of nerdish stuff using some programs that they write.
No, Python, it sounds like it's machine learning. Okay, that makes sense. That's actually what okay, great, thank you. Now, my second question, which was originally and for Abdon, when during your presentation, when you showed the score for Liberia, the 2016, 2018, and 2021, that table, you mentioned, well, not even just you mentioned, we saw that there was a drop, there was a positive move between 2016 and 2018, and then a negative turn between 2018 and 2021. And I remember you mentioned that following conversations with stakeholders, you concluded that that was because 2018 was an election year and so on and so forth. So my question is though, how do you account for external influences on your indicators in your analysis? Because when I saw that graph, the first thing that I thought of when I saw that jump was, with the pandemic in 2020, and then looking at the things that the indicators were measuring, it was perfectly logical that there would be a downward turn in subsequent years, because naturally, given everything that happened, you know, there's communal trauma, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it just kind of makes sense. So my question simply is, how do you account for stuff like that in your analysis?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so we do lots of controls based on the indicators we have. But let's say score methodology is combining, let's say, qualitative and quantitative approaches. So meaning that though we start with the qualitative approach to calibrate our research, after getting the result, we have to go back to the field and to the qualitative aspect in order to contextualize these results. So using the statistics only, we cannot let's say, understand all the processes. Scores gives, let's say, the structural phenomena that are at play when you're studying a specific issue. But in addition to these structural, let's say, structural phenomena, there are also some contextualized situations that are contributing to better understanding what's happening with any result that you have. And this is why we regularly go back to the partners, to the stakeholders, sometimes to the communities, in order to understand how these structural phenomena that we are highlighting are playing the role at play in their own contextual situation.
Okay.
So while doing the control, we also try to contextualize everything that we are doing so that we don't miss anything.
Okay, that's perfect. Thank you. There are a few hands raised. Tayam.
Yeah.
Like to
Sorry,
go first.
before we move on, Samuel, I just wanted to add one thing about data analysis, about your question.
Okay.
I believe you do have access to the SCORE training platform, right?
Yes, but yeah.
So
actually.
there we have some training modules on data analysis, which can provide all the nerdish explanations to any questions you may have. Yeah.
I'm going to check on that right now. Thank you.
Yes. And if you don't have access, just contact us and we can provide you access.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes.
I think there are a few hands raised. But I think, Meltem, this is true as well for any of the other volunteers, right, who may want to access the system, because I think that you need to apply and then not apply, but you need to register and then it has to be approved. I mean, to get access to the SCORE system.
Yeah.
So this, I think, is applicable to all the other volunteers.
Exactly.
If they are interested. All right, thank you. So we have a couple of hands up, Tayam and then Etienne. Tayam, if you could go ahead.
Yeah, hi everyone. Hi Milton, thank you for being here. I have a question toward the beginning. You mentioned something about creating like a platform, online platform in Cyprus, addressing gender inequality. So my question is, can you elaborate further on that? And if possible, how can we partake or contribute?
Oh, thank you, Tayam. Thank you. Thanks a lot for your follow-up on this. It's a campaign that will run on Pusula platform. It's cypruspusula.org. The campaign will be launched on next Friday, 31st of March, and it will run for a month. Basically, the idea of this campaign is to invite people to submit ideas to address gender inequalities in Cyprus. And the overall theory of change that we envision is to harder to reach audiences, because the whole intervention will run on social media and anyone can participate in it, because the platform has translation functionality, so it doesn't have to be Turkish or Greek. Anyone can share their ideas, and once the campaign goes live, we can help dissemination. I mean, you can support the dissemination efforts of the campaign, and if you're interested, we can have a meeting next week where we can discuss how we can better reach out to the student community in the north. I think that would help a lot, both for us and also to help the ideas of the students being heard as well. So the overall idea of this platform is, by crowdsourcing ideas, we plan to present these ideas to the policymakers at the end of the campaign, and then have more advocacy and outreach efforts to generate some public movement around these ideas for influencing change. So that's the idea at the moment. The campaign is not launched yet, but we have a week to go. It's coming.
I think I would speak on the behalf of everyone. We would be definitely interested in partaking in this.
Great, thank you. Thanks a lot. It really means a lot to us. Yeah. We can follow up via email if you like.
Would love that, actually. Thank you.
Yeah, and we can have a chat sometime next week if you want.
It would be an honor.
Great, thank you.
All right.
And Etienne?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening to everyone. I just have one question and then one little observation, but let me give the observation first before. Because since I'm surprised that we're dealing with Liberia today, so I felt it something to coming. I saw when she started with Ivory Coast. So my mind, I was like, Then I looked at the map and I saw, little figures there, and then this score came up. Just to show a little context on what Samuel said with regards to the 2018-2021. Being from there, if you looked at it very well, there was a progressive trend towards, that level of positivity. And at 2021, as he said, it was an election year. So people were in high spirits and were very happy with the fact that there was a transition, from one government to another, which was peaceful. However, even though the issue of the COVID affected, at the end of 2019 to 2020, if you look at the gap, but there was some disappointment in the government there from the second half of the year all the way up to 2019. So it also, in between that, there has been a couple of riot, street demonstrations and all that kinds of thing in between from 2018 going to June 2019. So also besides the COVID thing, there were also some other issues there that were not. And up to now, next year, there's an election also. So I'm sure maybe our school guys will go back again to see if they can do another test and see where this would be. Having said that, my question is, now look at the Liberian context. You've seen that it's 2016, 2018, and one of the things that you said was geared towards post-conflict. We are currently in a post-conflict country that is over 4 decades old. I'm just wondering, having implemented
Etienne, I think you're breaking.
Your voice is breaking.
I'm just wondering why.
Etienne, we can't hear anything. Maybe write it in the chat.
Okay. Okay. Still nothing?
Now you're good.
Maybe we should write a joint project with SeeD on improving internet connection in the northern part of
For sure.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Now it's good.
No, okay, let me just say in one sentence. I was just saying, why now? I'm sure you guys could have done it ever since here in Northern Cyprus. I'm just wondering why wasn't it done some time back? Why this time around? Are you planning to do something? Are you planning to do this? Are you planning to implement this core process here in Northern Cyprus as well?
We have implemented SCORE island-wide a couple of times in the past, in 2013, 14, 15, then 17, and then 18 as well, I think. So we haven't got any data collection in Cyprus since then, because our SCORE projects in Cyprus were mostly focused on the peace process. But unfortunately, the official track 1 level peace process collapsed in 2017. So then we just focused on measuring gender perceptions in the aftermath. But then, unfortunately, we had some funding limitations because there were no peace talks. People were not interested in supporting more research work. And as you can imagine, doing an island-wide research with 60-minute long questionnaire would cost some money. So unfortunately, we couldn't run a more recent SCORE in Cyprus, but it's something that we continuously keep exploring. That's the short answer, I would say.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
I mean, if I think that maybe our younger or newer volunteers are still trying to digest, the information that has been given tonight. But really, Meltem and Abdon, thank you so much for this introductory session into SeeD's work, but also the score index. I mean, from my own experience, I know that you actually need to, kind of like register into the system and try to kind of like, go through some of the material to have like a full or better understanding of how your framework works. And so I would want to really encourage the other volunteers to, go through the score index. And I think that especially the fact it's a contextual analysis, and there is really not so many contextual tools out there that have been tried and have been tested. I know that because I had tried to look for some before, and I think that score actually presents, the most robust that I at least have come across. And I think it's something that maybe our volunteers really want to try to take a look at, and see how we can learn from this. Hopefully in the future, depending on the work that SeeD does as well, that we can have some of our volunteers, who may be interested. I know that some have written even right now during this meeting saying how could they or how can they, be interns, for example, or try to learn more about this. I think that this would be an ongoing conversation. I think
Absolutely.
To see how this can work. This can work. Yeah, this can work. But also the new call for proposal, for example, maybe it could be an area where we could, try to explore. I know that VOIS is currently working on this, this consumer rights campaign, because we've been receiving a lot of comments from students that they literally cannot survive, and I think that just, trying to talk about it is not going to change anything much. I think that we really need to do an in-depth analysis into how it's going to affect the lives, not only of international students, but, international students, refugees, and migrants are disproportionately affected by this. So maybe this is an area that we would want to look into. I know Motsusi, for example, you asked something. I don't know if you wanted to share it as well. SeeD and VOIS. I know I'm putting you on the spot, but you did ask me, so maybe you want to clarify it with Meltem and maybe Abdon, since they are here.
Yeah, I was just on refers to like perhaps a partnership in terms of, as Emmanuel said, internship, and possibly on the angle of the call for proposal. I think that would work very good, especially because there's a lot one, which is basically research, and this methodology to be tested here would, I think, be very, very beneficial. So that was it.
I totally agree. Let's follow up on this next week.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, and on a final note,
I know we've gone beyond the time.
Yes, so I'll be sending the presentation after we close the session, and also I'll provide the link to the score index platform. So you can explore the research findings and download the reports and publications.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Before you go though, one last thing. I tried to join the Learn platform. I haven't gotten a confirmation email, so please talk to whoever. I tried it about 3 times, but it's not working.
I'll follow up with Ilka.
Thank you.
All right, really thank you so much. We are very appreciative of your efforts. We know that the organization was not as smooth as we wanted it to be, but we thankful that this has gone. As you said, next week we'll try to get into contact and see how we can build from this. So thank you so much to you, to Abdon, but to the entire C team, and
Thank you very much.
Members who are please, our best. Regards to them, and if it's from Ukraine, Nikola. So maybe, who knows, maybe he may be able to help. But thank you so much. And we would want to get a photo.
Yes, let's get a photo.
Before we all leave, if we can turn on our cameras for just a bit, for those who can, if we can turn on our cameras for just a bit, we can take one. I'm going to take from my computer, but
okay, set everyone.